Good morning, Year 9. My phone is currently balanced on a water jug. The jug is empty, thankfully, otherwise it might be pretty precarious. This is my homemade visualizer in my kitchen. So today I'm gonna go over with you a 12-mark question. The title of that question is on the screen. Greater Jihad is more important than lesser jihad. And I'd like you to write that down with obviously the little 12 mark next to it. And I'd like you to write this little table as well as a plan, agree and disagree. Can you please pause this video once you've written them both down? I'd like you to fill in that table with as much as you can from the work you did last lesson. So a couple of reasons, if you can, why greater jihad is more important than lesser jihad. And a couple of reasons why somebody might disagree. Now, when they disagree, somebody might say that lesser jihad is more important than greater jihad, or they would go less extreme and just say it's not more important than lesser jihad, it's just as important. So they disagree with that word more. When you get this question and you get like a more important word in it, remember you can disagree in a number of ways. So the lesser jihad could be more important, or could just be as important. So pause this video, write the statement, have a go at a plan, and then hit play again on the video, and I will take you through some of the points I have made, and we can see if they match up. Okay? So if I was agreeing with this statement, to start off, I would say that greater jihad, yes, it is more important than lesser jihad because of the frequency in which it occurs. Okay, so greater jihad, I'm just going to put GJ for that, occurs every day and more than once per day. For a Muslim who is really serious about greater jihad, the struggle to improve themselves, because it occurs every day, whereas lesser jihad doesn't really occur every day, it might occur regularly to a degree, but not every single day, then it can't be as important, because that which is more important is more regular in somebody's lifestyle. The second reason why greater jihad is more important than lesser jihad is because it focuses on the inner self. And I want to explain why that makes it more important in a second. Focuses on inner self. Now, the reason that's important for a Muslim is because the way that we make the world a better place is by making ourselves better people. If we all took time in our lives to improve ourselves, to make ourselves more generous, more accepting, more tolerant, less prejudiced, less discriminatory, less sexist, less racist, etc., then the world itself would be better. So because greater jihad is about focusing on the self, if everyone did this, this would lead to a better world as a result. Whereas lesser jihad is about protecting Islam from threat, which is important, but doesn't necessarily make a better world as much as greater jihad does. So they're the reasons in favour. The reasons to disagree with this statement. Number one, you could argue here that lesser jihad is as important than greater jihad or more important. I'm going to go to start with as important. It is about defending the faith. If lesser jihad didn't exist, Islam wouldn't exist. Around the time of Muhammad, 1400 years ago, lesser jihad was vital for the survival of the faith of Islam, because the Islamic faith was under threat, it was under persecution, and Muhammad decreed that it was reasonable and important for people to stand up in violent self-defense in order to protect their faith and in fact secure the longevity of their faith. Islam would have died out had there been no lesser jihad. So if it didn't exist, we wouldn't be here with Muslims in the world today, and therefore it is as important as greater jihad. Just because it's not all the time doesn't mean it's not so important. And finally, You can also say that they're both equally important because they are both referred to in the Qur'an and Hadith. We looked at that wonderful quote last lesson from Muhammad, which said, if somebody sees something wrong, let them change it with their hand. If they are unable to, let them change it with their tongue. If they are unable to, then let them change it with their heart and pray about it. And so that's talking about lesser jihad, but there's also plenty of quotes about greater jihad and self-improvement and making oneself better, which is obviously meaning that both of them are equally important. So, if I was to conclude this before I wrote it, I would probably conclude that whilst lesser jihad is important, I would say that greater jihad is more important for the reasons that I've stated, and also because, the clue's in the name, greater jihad, but it links so clearly to the 5 pillars of Islam that it's really hard to get away from the fact that it's just an integral part of a Muslim's life. I would go as far to say that not every Muslim who ever lived has to perform lesser jihad, but every Muslim who ever lived does have to perform greater jihad. So therefore it is more important because it covers more people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write one paragraph. You are going to write the second paragraph, and you are going to write a conclusion. Now remember, when we are writing 12-mark paragraphs in RE, we are peeling. So that is your point, which starts off your paragraph, your explanation of that point, more detail, evidence to back up that point, and then linking that point back to the statement at the beginning. Okay, so explaining how this point answers this statement. If you are also looking at this point for scoring higher marks and you haven't yet mastered the conclusion, which we'll come on to later, you might want to add another E onto the end of that, which is an evaluation. Okay, and this is where you evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of that specific argument. Now I'm going to say quite clearly, you do not need to do this in every paragraph. You can sufficiently do this in your conclusion and you can still get 12 marks. Okay, so there are some people that prefer to evaluate as they go and have a shorter conclusion, and there are some who just prefer to peel and then have a longer conclusion at the end. Either are fine. Okay, both can get you 12 marks depending on how well you've written them. So for this one, I am going to just focus on peeling without the final E. Okay, and we'll have a look at the conclusion later on. So if I can try and keep this in as well in the shot. There we go. Okay, so my first sentence is always the same. It's always going to start with the word some, because we know that not every single person agrees. Some Muslims agree with this statement because. It's really simple when you get into that first sentence because it's the same every single time you do an RE essay, which means that you can start every essay without having to think about how you're going to start it because you've got the same sentence. You might change the word Muslims to Christians, but you're starting with the same words, which is really, really helpful. Some Muslims agree with the statement because greater jihad, I'm going to include our first point here, greater jihad occurs every day, and I'm going to build on that a little bit more as well, and multiple times per day. So I can tick that off there. Now I've made my point, I need to explain my point before I give evidence to back it up. So my explanation of that point is going to talk about what greater jihad is and why it occurs every single day. So, as greater jihad is the struggle, make sure you use that word struggle when you're talking about jihad, to make oneself more pleasing to Allah. As Greater Jihad is a struggle to make oneself more pleasing to Allah, it is something which all Muslims should do in order to live a good life. So, I've made my point. I've explained that point. I've written 2 sentences. They're quite long sentences, but they're only 2 sentences. I'm now going to give evidence, and in that evidence, what I'm going to do is I'm going to link Greater Jihad to the 5 pillars, and I'm going to give evidence of certain things which Muslims do every single day, which can also be considered Greater Jihad, such as Salah. Okay, because the daily prayers are an example of Greater Jihad, which shows that it occurs every day and multiple times per day, which is a fantastic example. So as Greater Jihad is called to make oneself more pleasing to Allah, it's something which all Muslims should do in order to live a good life. An example of this is praying the daily prayers. Now, I'm not going to say 5 daily prayers because not all Muslims pray 5 times a day. Remember, Shias pray 3. So we're just going to say the daily prayers, in brackets, Salah. Where possible, use your key terms. By praying every day, the door's just gone, 1 second. I'm sorry, Year 9, the doorbell just went as I was recording that video and I had to get a delivery. Right, where was I? By praying every day, this is the joys of home learning, isn't it? A Muslim may reconnect with Allah give thanks to Allah and beg Allah for forgiveness, all part of self-improvement. That is now a point, an explanation, evidence/example, and I'm now going to link this all back together, and I'm going to use this paragraph to explain why Greater Jihad is more important than Lesser Jihad. Because it occurs far more regularly than Lesser Jihad, Greater Jihad is more important. Now you'll notice there that I didn't talk about how many people perform Greater Jihad compared to Lesser Jihad. Namely, I didn't say all Muslims perform Greater Jihad, whereas only some perform Lesser Jihad, because I'm going to save that point for my conclusion. I'm going to draw a little bubble here. Conclusion, okay? All GJ, some LJ. Imagine you were a lawyer in a court. You'd save your best point till last. You'd save that best point to the final part of your argument. That's going to be my best point, okay? And that's going to what I'm going to say right to the end. So these is my first paragraph. Now I'm going to move on to, when I say I mean you, I'm going to move on to the second paragraph. Now, what you need to do, you need to either write a second half of the agree paragraph, i.e. this one here, how it makes the inner self better, which then leads to a better world. And you can talk there about things like the generosity or the selflessness that is practiced during Psalm or Zakah. That's your evidence there. Or you go on to the disagree paragraph and you talk about this and the fact that Muslims were defending their faith at the time of Muhammad, which then makes that important. And you can go disagree and then come back to agree and then back disagree. Okay, and then you can finish with your conclusion. Either way, we need 2 points on each side. Okay, 2 points to agree, 2 points to disagree, and a conclusion. So that might look like 5 paragraphs, all this length. Okay, give it your best shot. Let me know if you need any help, and I will mark whatever you submit. Thanks very much.